Welcome to Christ's Chapel in Duliwch. It was built in 1616, 5 years before the death of Sweelinck in 1621. Throughout his life, he held the post at the Oude Kerk in Amsterdam. He was appointed at the age of 15 after the death of his father. In his lifetime, he was known chiefly for choral sacred music and for his teaching, his improvisation, his concerts. He was absolutely superb at all of it and attracted students from all over Europe and England. Samuel Scheidt, Heinrich Scheidemann, Jacob Praetorius, and Andreas Dubin, to whom we owe a great debt of gratitude for keeping manuscripts that might otherwise have been lost. He also knew Dr. John Bull from England, and his music found its way into the Fitzwilliam Virginals book. As a composer of keyboard music, these pieces appeared in the last 15 years of his life. They comprise psalm settings, toccatas, fantasias, and songs and dances. I'm going to start with an introduction to the psalm settings. This particular one, Mein Hüter und mein Hirt, which is Psalm 23 to you and me, does not appear in the Dover edition, which most people have, but it's in the Breitkopf edition, which appeared in 2004-5, edited by Harold Vogel and Peter Dirksen. It has 4 verses, and the right-hand solo is a solo throughout 4 verses. It's very, very beautiful and often evokes a really curious response. What was that you played in the concert, or before or after a service? The right hand takes a solo throughout, and its beauty is made up from little happy shapes that have been derived from the melody line. I'm reminded of Bob Ross, the TV artist, in this. Octave displacements, little imitations, lots of repeated notes, you name it, it's there. And this is verse 1 of Mein Hüter und mein Hirt, and I hope you enjoy it. Welcome to the Songs and Dances department. Many of you will have heard of Mein junges Leben hat ein Ende, or recent FRCO students before the syllabus changed might have learned Unter der Linden Grüne, both very harpsichordy and both very difficult, so not for the faint-hearted. So for those of you who are interested in trying something a little bit easier, I'm recommending that you have a go at Ballet del Gran Duca. Some people think it's by Samuel Scheidt, but it's appeared in so many manuscripts attributed to Sweelinck that it's found its way into the Dirksen edition, volume 4, page 84, and in the Dover edition it's on page 237. The ballet is a light-hearted madrigal, and it has your foot tapping in no time. The first chunk of this is a statement of the theme, and then when the first variation gets going, your right hand is decorating the melody. In the second variation, the left hand gets a go by having a nice little walking bass line. By the time you've got to the third variation, your right hand is being required to have done lots of scale practice as fast as possible, because that's what you've got to play. And the final variation has you playing an awful lot of scales in thirds. But it's a lot of fun, and it's not that bad. So anyone can have a go at this who is really determined that they're going to learn something pretty quick and enjoyable. I hope you enjoy listening to this one. I'm using very light registration on the organ, and you'll hear the changes as we go along. turn our attention now to the serious business of the fantasia. So forget any ideas of thinking it's all about Walt Disney, because it isn't. In 1597, English composer Thomas Morley wrote in his plain and easy introduction to practical music that the highest form of art was the composition and performance of a fantasia. He was, of course, referring to the highest forms of contrapuntal writing. Every European composer seeking fame and fortune had to learn these skills, and so they all vied with each other using themes of common currency such as ut, re, mi, fa, sol, la. That's do, re, mi, fa, sol, la to you and me. They all competed with each other to see who could do the best one, and Sweelinck was no stranger to this, as was his friend in England, Dr. John Bull. The best of the fantasias in Dirkson's Volume 2 and in the Dover volume as well, in which it appears as the first piece, is the Fantasia Chromatica. Peter Dirksen says of the Fantasia Chromatica that it is the most important piece of chromatic music before Bach. So it has a chromatic theme which increases in intensity as you get towards the end of the piece. And it's not the only fantasia to behave like this. Unfortunately, it's a little bit too long to play you today, being nearly 10 minutes in duration. So I'm going to play you instead a fantasia called Fantasia mit Bindungen, or Fantasia with tied notes. I find that this is a great study for part playing. Sietze de Vries in Groningen once said to me that he thought it was a vocal piece with the choral parts missing. So you perhaps think you're playing something incomplete, and I wouldn't blame you for that. But for example, an older player coming back to the organ, and they've forgotten how to use the fourth and fifth finger on the left hand, I find it's a very good exercise for training those fingers to sustain the lower notes for a full semi-breve or a full minim, because over years they haven't always remembered how to do it, and the fingers have just forgotten. So this is the Fantasia mit Bindungen. It lasts for about 5 minutes, and I hope you enjoy the myriad suspensions, all beautiful. And in order to enjoy it, just imagine when you're hearing it that you're listening to a choir of angels singing something absolutely divine. Enjoy. Finally, I'd like to show you the toccata in C, or the Ionian mode. This is a bravura piece, and it's not for the faint-hearted. And it's really probably intended for the harpsichord more than for the organ. In Duliwch, it's on page 72 of volume 1, and in Dover, it's page 117. At the beginning of this toccata, you have a C major chord. Nothing else, a C major chord. But you're not meant to play it like that. You're meant to whiz up and down the keyboard and just show what key this music is in. And right at the end, it's got a C major scale going down from middle C to C an octave below. But I like to add another one because I can get down to bottom C and enjoy the sound of that deep rumbling note. And it just makes a nice, satisfactory conclusion. You need a pretty good keyboard technique to play this, and you certainly need to enjoy playing scales. And it's marvellous when they're all on the white notes because they're easier to do than looking up the scales with the black notes in. There are more toccatas like this, of course, but this one is a very accessible one if you have a good technique and you enjoy playing. Do enjoy it. A final word about playing music by Sweelinck. In volume 1 of the Dirksen edition, at the back you will find some pages of examples with early fingering. They've been reconstructed, and it's worth learning how to do this because it simply shows you how the little shapes are more easily fingered using fingers 2, 3 and 4 and not necessarily using your thumb or your fifth finger. Should you be using this all the time is another question. For myself, I tend to use a mixture of early fingering and conventional fingering because that's what we've all been brought up with, because we do play all the scales in all the keys, whereas in Sweelinck's day they hadn't really got as far as B major, at least not quite, although some of the theoretical analysts were certainly inventing them, Sarlino being one of them. I take the Gillian Weir approach to this. She said, you put the strong finger on the strong note. That means you have to know what the strong note is. But I find it serves as a very good guide for me, and that's what I teach all my students. It's a very good rule of thumb.